Welcome to the Frequency Labyrinth. I am Adrienne McDonald, your host. This podcast is for you if you're done with surface level self-help and ready for something deeper and actually transformative. Around here, we work with ancient wisdom, human design, gene keys, and shamanic practices, not as knowledge to collect, but as tools to live by. This isn't about one size fits all. It's about learning to work with your energy, your design, and your life. This is about integration and embodiment. We go deep here with ancient wisdom, practical integration, so that you can develop ironclad self-trust. Let's get into it. Hello, beautiful humans, and welcome back, or welcome if it's your first time. Today we are kicking off a brand new series that I'm calling Building Your Spiritual Support Architecture. I've been sitting with how to bring more of the shamanic side of my work into these conversations to you. And this episode is the first step because, well, the world feels heavy and it feels polarized and more chaotic than it has been in my lifetime anyway. And I feel like there's this kind of spiritual erosion happening now where old frameworks aren't holding up like they used to. Not that that's a bad thing or a good thing, it just is. And the new ones sometimes often feel shallow or disconnected. And this is why I believe this work matters now more than ever. And when you tend to yourself on this deeper level, when you refill your, inner vessels, your inner being, and you reclaim your spiritual support, you don't just change your life, you show up differently in the world from a more healed place. And I feel like that ripples out to everyone around you in a good way. So today we're going to start with your inner team, so your energy centers. Now, a lot of different cultures have a lot of different names for the energy centers in your body. And most people are probably most familiar with chakras. And I have worked with chakras in the past. I don't as much anymore not because chakra work doesn't work. They do. I know plenty of people that do work with chakras. But as I was entering my training, in Celtic shamanism, that's not part of that lineage. And when I work with now, I really resonated more with it. So I work with something that's rooted in the Celtic tradition called the Three Cauldrons. And today I'm going to explain the Three Cauldrons and how I tie it into human design and how I tie shamanic healing into human design and building your spiritual support team from sort of the inside out. So when most people first encounter human design, they learn that the system, one of the components of the system is built on the chakra model. And traditionally, chakras are understood as the same 7 main centers. But in human design, they've been adapted into 9, with some of the original centers split to reflect what, I guess, Ra thought within our evolution. And I feel like it's important to honor that chakras come from the Vedic system, a lineage with incredibly deep spiritual roots. And in the West, they've widely been picked up in and criticized for being in some of the New Age spirituality circles. So, and in some ways that don't reflect their full cultural context, which is, I think, one of the reasons why I've had challenges with it. But for me, chakras have always felt like a powerful map and one that many people can use and benefit from, but it's not the only map. I realize that. And so I found one that works for me that I'm going to share with you. When I trained in Celtic shamanism, I entered this different framework. And from the first time I worked with them, I felt like like there was just something deep in me that it resonated with. And it also, there's 3 energy centers in the Celtic tradition, which honestly is a little simpler for my brain and the way it works. And the number 3 is really important in the Celtic tradition. And the number 3 has always been really important in my life as well. So I was like, oh, this is just like I resonated at a different level. So in the Celtic tradition, energy isn't necessarily pictured as like spinning wheels. It's imagined as cauldrons. These are living containers, vessels that can be upright or tipped or overturned, empty or full. And this teaching comes from an old Irish poem, The Cauldron of Poesy, which tells us each of the 3 cauldrons. Each of us carry the 3 cauldrons. We have the cauldron of warming, we have the cauldron of motion, and we have the cauldron of wisdom. And we're not born with all 3 upright. I find that fascinating. The cauldron of warming is upright at birth. It's our spark of life. The cauldron of motion begins tipped sideways, and it's sort of shaped by the joys and sorrows of living. And the cauldron of wisdom in the head is born overturned, only righting itself through initiation, through making meaning of our experiences. And these cauldrons aren't necessarily rigid centers. They're vessels that they spill and they fill and they shift with us, which is, it's like that deeply human and deeply practical experience of being human, right? So the first cauldron is called, and I hope I'm not going to get disemboweled by my teacher by my pronunciation, is the Coire Goiriath, the cauldron of warming, located in the belly. And this is your life force, your vitality, your breath, your sexual and creative energy is what keeps you alive. It's literally the fire in your belly. And when the cauldron of warming is full and upright, you feel grounded, you feel nourished, you feel resilient, you've got the energy to move through life without draining yourself. When it's empty, you may feel fatigued or burned out or like you're running on fumes. And because this cauldron is upright from birth, it reminds us that our body's wisdom it's always available, right? But it's got to be tended. Food, rest, breath, movement, connection to the earth. Those are all ways you fill this cauldron. If you ignore it, and you'll know quickly because your body is going to speak through exhaustion. Now, when we move to the next cauldron, and the second cauldron, or the middle cauldron, is called Coire Ernmae, and the cauldron of motion, which rests in the heart and chest. And this vessel holds your emotions, your passions, your relationships, and your sense of purpose. And it's not just about how you feel, it's about how you move in the world. This is also called the cauldron of vocation. Like what inspires you, what you grieve, what sets your heart on fire. The old texts even describe it as, like I said, why you're here, our work, our purpose, our contribution, it all flows from this place. At birth, this cauldron is tipped sideways, and it writes itself through joy and connection and creativity and inspiration. But it can also overturn completely through the weight of sorrow or heartbreak or despair. And in the Cauldron of Poesy, the poet describes the 4 divisions of sorrow that can spill and overturn this cauldron. And the first one is longing and grief that arises from separation or loss or unfulfilled desire. It really is that. It reminds me of when you're doing things out of obligation, that unfulfilled desire, and maybe going down a work path that just because you're good at something doesn't mean that you have to do it forever, right? And there's also jealousy, that gnawing energy that drains the heart when we compare ourselves to others. I would include envy in that as well. And separation from what we love, like the ache of being cut off from connection or belonging, the isolation of it all, an imbalance, the disharmony that comes from life feeling really fractured when our inner world and our outer worlds don't line up, when we feel out of integrity. And these sorrows don't mean that the cauldron is broken. They mean that the vessel has been overturned, waiting for it to be righted again. And in that tipping, something happens. The emotion themselves can become the fuel for transformation, right? When the cauldron of motion is upright, we feel inspired and emotionally available and able to give and receive love. And when it's sideways, we may feel reactive and uncertain and pulled in multiple directions. And when it's overturned, emotions can feel overwhelming, or you could feel numbed out and they've drained out of you completely. And this cauldron teaches us that emotions aren't problems to bypass. They're fire that tempers us. Every joy, every sorrow, every heartbreak has that potential for alchemy, shaping us into can shape us into the best version of ourselves, right? Refining our sense of purpose, reminding us why we're here. And then the last cauldron is Coire Sois, the cauldron of wisdom. It's resting in the head. This is the vessel of vision and insight and divine connection, the place where inspiration lives, where the Celts called Embas for Rasni. It illuminates us from within. It's the reason why my Substack is called Seeking Embas, right? According to the Cauldron of Poesy, Coire Sois is born overturned. It's interesting because the Celts believed in reincarnation, but they believed that all of our past lives were like emptied out, and that's the reason why the wisdom, the cauldron of wisdom, the upper cauldron is empty and overturned. And I think that there's something interesting about that, because there's truth in that image. Like, wisdom isn't our starting point. When we first come into the world, we carry vitality in the belly and seeds of emotion in the heart. Like, we've got all this ripe energy. But wisdom has to be earned and cultivated and nourished over time. And it rights itself only when the other cauldrons are feeding it. When the body has the strength of the cauldron of warming. When the heart has the cauldron of motion engaged with the full spectrum of life. So think of it this way, is the cauldron of wisdom doesn't generate its own fire in a huge way. I feel like it draws fuel from below and also from above, right? If the body's depleted, there's no energy to rise. If the heart's blocked or overturned, the emotions and the passions that inspire wisdom, they can't flow upward. So only when the first two cauldrons are tended to does this cauldron begin to right itself. And when it does, it doesn't do just through suffering. The poem speaks of the four divisions of joy that fill this vessel. The joy of health and vitality when the body is strong and well enough to support the vision. The joy of thriving and abundance when life is in flow and we have space to see beyond survival. And my personal favorite is like the joy of song and poetry, that creative fire that moves through us and gives form to inspiration. The joy of divine inspiration itself, the sudden rush of embos, that gift of vision that feels like it comes from something outside of ourselves. But we can feel that connection to something divine. These joys, along with tempering that comes from life's challenges, we'll say, this is all parts of the pieces that write this particular cauldron. And when it finally stands upright, the cauldron of wisdom doesn't just hold knowledge, it becomes like a living channel for inspiration and insights like revelation. Suddenly patterns may make sense. Creativity feels like it may have a life of its own, like the muse is really talking. And the Celts understood that wisdom wasn't just a matter of thinking harder. It was the overflow of vitality that nourishes the body and the heart and spirit. That's Mbas Farasni, coming to life. Coming to life. And the belly provides the fire, the heart provides the passion. Together they kindle that vision that just pours out, like when everything's working in concert at its highest expression. There is a great book by Rhonda McCrimmon, who was my shaman teacher, called The Cauldron and the Drum, A Journey into Celtic Shamanism, and I will put a link to that book in the show notes. And it goes much more in depth than I could do here on the cauldrons. It has rituals in the book, it has practices in the book to go deeper with all three of these. In the interim, I'm going to give you three practices that I work with, the cauldrons, in my daily life, that you may feel called to work with. So the first is the daily check-in. Each morning, pause, ask yourself, which of my energy centers feels full today, and which one feels empty? Like if your lower cauldron is feeling low, you might want to give yourself food and rest and movement or time in nature. Think of it as refilling your fire. If your middle cauldron feels tipped, notice what emotions are spilling out. Like, do you have a longing or a grief or jealousy or even the positive emotions like joy? Are you allowing those emotions to move through you, or are you trying to stifle them? And then your upper cauldron, if your head feels foggy or that cauldron feels overturned, have I tended to the other two first? Because often clarity comes once vitality and emotion are honored. The two is offering. The cauldrons love a good ritual. Once a week, set a time to make an offering. You may create an altar practice. You could spend time journaling. You could spend time picking up trash on a greenway as a way to get back to nature. And then number 3, the creative flow. The Celts saw poetry and song and creativity as evidence that the cauldrons were alive and upright. Pick one creative act this week. Writing or singing or painting or dancing or cooking. Whatever feels natural, but not for the outcome, but as a way of letting the cauldron sort of pour through you. And notice how the belly fuels the heart and the heart fuels the head. And this practice often clears the fog and opens up the space for that divine inspiration that feels like it's coming from outside of you, right? It's that connection with the divine. And the point here is not perfection. It's about relationship. The more you tend to the cauldrons, the more they tend to you. Now, if you have something that's like an issue that is continuously coming up, this is one of several ways that you can tend to your energy centers. Like, You guys know, if you've been listening for a while, I'm an energy practitioner. Reiki is great. Meditation is great. Tapping is great for those that it works. Like, you have to find what works for you. And one of the ways that I work with shamanic healing and human design and the cauldrons is something called Healing Through the Labyrinth, where it's a one-on-one virtual session where I use your human design, your natal chart as the entry point, and together we track the challenge, whether it's rooted in a gate, a planetary placement, a specific zeroing in on a specific cauldron. Then we work with it directly through shamanic healing. You know, it's not just insight, it's integration. In a session, you may experience a power retrieval, an energetic clearing, an ancestral healing, some sort of insight about this particular challenge. You know, whatever's most needed in the moment. And then we ground it with practical steps so that the medicine, if you will, actually lives in your body and in your choices. So if you've been resonating with what I've shared about the cauldrons, and you feel like you want to go deeper, and you actually need help refilling them and writing them, which we can use your human design chart and your astrological natal chart to come together and give you more insight, then this type of work may be appropriate for you. So I will put a link into the show notes that will give you more information about that. So as we close today, I want you to sit with this question though. Which of my cauldrons is being asked to be refilled or righted right now? Even simply naming something, feeling into that, or looking at your energy centers in a different way than you have before may give you some insight. And if you're ready for deeper support, if you're feeling like one of those things is stuck and you can't shift it on your own, that's why I'm here. And you can schedule a session. And you'll find that link in the show notes. In the next episode of this series, we're going to be moving from the inner structure to the outer structure. How to start building your spiritual support team through guides. So you'll want to be here for that. Make sure you're subscribed. And until then, you can start tending your cauldrons with care. Also, remember to find beauty every day and seek the magic in the mundane. Thanks for tuning in today. As always, take what resonates, leave the rest. Let whatever landed move through you in whatever way it needs to or wants to. And also, if you want to explore more, you'll find more information in the show notes. If this episode stirred something in you, please share it out or leave a quick review. It helps so much and I really appreciate it. And remember, this work is about integration and it always starts with self-trust.